So you like punching. I mean, you really, really, really like punching. Do I have the build for you? So, this is a bit of a more involved build than most of my use. This build is a bit more involved than most of my usual builds. I usually have a set stat distribution for my main character. This is not it. This build is very geared to doing one thing and one thing only, and that's high defense, so max health, max stamina. I know max health makes barely any difference. If you're not looking to have max health, you could probably put the same into strike supers, but that's not going to make much difference in this build, because basic attack is where we're getting all of our damage. And the reason for that is actually in the equipment. And that's Boo's reached full power with a Super Soul that reduces our ki. You could have a Super Soul that reduced your ki more than this, and the build would still function. That's only for a male Saiyan, however, because this build could also function for a male Earthling. And in fact, the male Earthling might be more powerful with this build. I haven't tested, because I don't know the male Earthling combos, so I've only tested with a male Saiyan and Super Saiyan God. However, if you're playing a male Earthling, male Earthlings double up their ability boost from this build, because this build increases your basic attacks, or strength of all attacks actually, when you're at max ki. Male Earthlings also have that ability where when their ki is maxed, they get a boost to their damage, and they're already pretty good at basic attacks. The downside to being a male Earthling is you would still need 5 ki bars because you at least want to run a transformation, so you'd want Potential Unleashed. For a male Saiyan, however, you only need 3 ki bars to activate Super Saiyan God, which is their biggest basic attack boost, so you can have a net negative on ki, and in fact, a net negative on ki for this build is a bonus, because the faster you get to max ki, the better, and that happens faster when you have lower overall max ki. This build with these stats ends up with 4 and a tiny bit extra ki bars, which is good enough because you get there in 2 burst charges, which burst charge slows down a lot towards that 3rd ki bar, so even if you have only 3 ki bars, you're probably going to want to get there in 2 burst charges. If you charge 2.5 ki bars with burst charge, you could still get to 5, which is the Potential Unleashed level with burst charge, so it doesn't necessarily matter that much either way. You will get there slightly faster with lower ki. For optimization purposes, it's not really going to make much of a difference. So for skills, I tried quite a few things here. None of these matter super much except for the Awoken skill. The Awoken skill matters a lot. Super Saiyan God is pretty much the best way to run this, at least as a male Saiyan, and Potential Unleashed for a male Earthling. The reason I have Last Emperor and Breaker Energy Wave is because they don't cost anything. They are usable. Last Emperor is usable only once when your health is low. Breaker Energy Wave is usable only once when your enemy's health is low. So if you're trying to take this build into PvP, you do have 2 usable ultimates, but you might want to take the extra stat points out of health and put them into ki if you're trying to run these. I don't think these are the way to go, though. They're just there so you have a ranged attack at a couple of points in the match, but otherwise your best damage is still going to be coming out of melee. Pressure Sign is a counter, which is usable in certain situations, like if someone's coming in for a dash-in and you just want a quick way to counter that, or if they're using an ultimate that, for example, they've just done, say, Ribrianne's Eternal Love, which is a nightmare to get around otherwise, and you want a way to get behind it. Pressure Sign's great for that, because it literally puts you behind your opponent on contact with any hit, so it's usable in certain situations, but it does cost ki, so after you use it, you are going to need to build that ki back up. Being in Potential Unleashed or Super Saiyan God does offset this a bit, because it gives you increased ki gain, so you could get it back in about half a combo. Not the end of the world, but it will lower your damage a bit. Burst Charge is basically required for this build. It's the best way to get ki when you're on a low-key build like this. So, absolutely burst charge. I usually run Divinity Unleashed as my main ki charge on every single one of my builds. It is not nearly as good as burst charge for this build. Critical Upper, literally a counter to UI Goku. The only reason I have Critical Upper in this build is to make contact with UI Goku in certain missions. If you're running PvP, you could put something else here. Doesn't necessarily matter either way. Prepare to be Punished is a buff. It doesn't specify what kind of buff, which is great, because, you know, why would you want to know what stats there are to a thing? It doesn't cost anything, and it stops you being able to switch lock-on. If you're solo in a mission or doing PvP, not being able to switch lock-on doesn't make any difference. People have suggested that it makes you take slightly more damage. I haven't noticed that. It's just seemed like a very minor attack buff that doesn't last terribly long. Useful in certain situations, but basically we don't want skills that cost ki, so we have a very limited amount of things that will work. This is one of the ones that would work. And for your evasive, any evasive that costs 2 bars, so Instant Rise, Spirit Explosion, Super Explosive Wave, all would work. I've gone for Spirit Explosion. I usually go for Super Explosive Wave. Genuinely doesn't matter, just whatever works for you. You could run a 3 bar, because this build has so much stamina. I still wouldn't recommend it. I would still run a 2 bar evasive. They're just superior, in my opinion. Okay, so using this build. It's pretty easy. You want to get to max ki as soon as possible, and that can be done by engaging in melee, so it's not even a big worry if you want to use burst charge, or if you want to just engage in melee. You're pretty much just getting in there and trying to loop your opponent with the biggest, most damaging combo you know over and over. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. If you're running PvP, it's going to be a case-by-case basis, because PvP is its own beast. I don't necessarily know about that, but for PvE purposes, I found that the heavy break works a lot better than the light break. Now, I've been doing the up-kick combo, and I learned that you can light break after it, which looks great, because that keeps your opponent in melee with you, and then you can just keep kicking their ass. However, I found that the AI loves to vanish the light break. The AI does not love to vanish the heavy break, meaning that it's actually probably better to do the heavy combo, smash them with the heavy, hit them with any kind of ki stun, or just rush at them, and repeat. This combo is probably the way to go. And it's the most damage for a male Saiyan. If you're trying the build with an Earthling, it's whatever damage is biggest for you. I don't necessarily know. I don't know the Earthling combos. And again, this could probably work for most characters using Potential Unleashed and combos. It's just Saiyans have Super Saiyan Gold, which is a really, really big boost to unarmed, and Earthlings have high base unarmed and higher unarmed damage if they're at max ki, which stacks with the Super Soul. So those are just the best two for trying this kind of build out. The other combos are boosted, so your XXX combo is still going to do more damage, but it is considerably less damage than the... Yeah, that's 13k for the XYX combo, which is the upkick combo, followed by a big stamina break, versus just hammering away at X will still get you 5,000 damage, which is under half, so not super much. If you're struggling with the XYX combo and you still want to try this build out, I would suggest just transitioning to this combo, which is probably the easiest one to learn in my opinion. So when you do the little side kicks as a male Saiyan, there they are. Transition from hammering X to hammering Y. You can see it in the inputs down the side of the screen. It's really easy. You just have to listen for that tap, tap, tap sound in the combo. There it is. And then you just start pressing the Y button. Nearly as much damage, but you can't do the stamina break after it. Still a perfectly serviceable combo, though. And we'll just compare it to the upkick damage. About the same. I say about the same, but The extra damage of being able to stamina break your opponent and go into another combo is pretty high, so this just genuinely depends on what your skill level is and what combos you know. There's also critical upper that can be used at the end of a combo to extend it, but also that's going to mean that you're only going to be doing the main damage from this build with the last hit, and the up kick is the biggest amount of damage, so you can use this on loop if you need to. Just know that you're going to be dipping in and out of use of your Super Soul while doing this if you use this combo. That said, it is effectively an easy instant loop for massive amounts of damage that is going to force your opponent to either vanish or evasive out of it, or they just keep taking damage forever.
One eternity later.
Anyway, that's a pretty simple one. That's the Unga Bunga build. If you want to go test it out, leave comments down below. Tell me what you think of it. Tell me if it worked for you. And if you want to see me use this build to beat PQ122, which I believe is the hardest PQ in the game, no healing items, no allies, no limit burst, you can click right here. If not, thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time.